Thank you again to all the present for being here. It was incredible the participation this year. I like very much the participation of especially our foreign friends from 23 different countries that attend this year the meeting. Let's start with the second conversation that is regarding a topic that we discussed during the last months inside the association, and we have a very interesting debate. And nowadays is the moment for present the conclusions and discuss about this topic. So for this conversation, we have here Mr. Denis Zwirm from the French company Numilog. Denis is one of the most important experts in terms of digital rights management around the world, in my particular opinion. And he writes a very interesting article regarding blockchain that is the first time that I fairly understand what's blockchain, and it's published in the website of Renodo. That is a project that we are in partnership with the Germán Sánchez Rupert Foundation. Mr. Gregorio Pellegrini from Italy, from the publishing company Effatà Editrice.
Right.
Gregorio is also an expert regarding formats. He participates in several international meetings and in working groups in W3C, for instance. So I think he's the right person also to be here in order to explain about the conversion of formats and how it's happened at an international level regarding the formats. And finally, last but not least, Sebastian Posth from Germany. We met in Frankfurt last year, and Sebastian is working as consultancy. He works during years in the publishing industry in Germany. And it's also very interesting the works that he's developing the last year.
2 years.
2 years regarding blockchain, in always blockchain. I know it's a trend, but well, it's one of the topics that we are treating. And Sebastian is working in a very interesting initiative in the German industry that is a kind of working group regarding the use of blockchain for the publishing industry in general with open source technology. And I'm sure that Sebastian will give you more feedback regarding this initiative. So, well, I have some questions for all the participants, but always feel free to change ideas, opinion, and of course, if there are questions for the people at the room. So, my first question, starting with Denis, but feel free also to participate, is regarding the evolution of formats during the last years. This conference is 10 years after. What's your opinion regarding what's happened regarding the formats, convergence, etc. during the last 10 years? So, Denis?
Okay. Oh, thank you, José, for this invitation, for this conversation, and sorry if I use a paper because these are quite technical matters, and in English it's more comfortable if I quote some points from this paper. The question is, what was the evolution from the last 10 years? And if you allow me, I will come back even a little earlier, because I'm not a tech person, I'm only a retailer and a distributor of ebooks, but I observe this market since almost 20 years. I began with ebooks in 1999, so I have the time to observe a long evolution. And we have had many formats for ebook, many. Of course, at the beginning, we were working only with PDF, and it's still there. And after we observed the new formats proposed by Microsoft, some of you perhaps remember .lit, and after by MobiPocket, .prc, and other formats that I will not quote. The last 10 years, but during 10 years, this was the landscape of very various formats. And the last 10 years is characterized by an important work for trying to promote a new interoperable standard format. And of course, it is EPUB. What are the goals of this standardization purpose? I believe there are 5 goals. The first one is to ensure interoperability. And it is interoperability for the people who are reading, of course, but also it is business-to-business interoperability for exchanges between professionals. The second is to create referable e-books that fits any kind of device. We must remind that .prc from MobiPocket already did this in 2001, but EPUB take over this goal that is very important, of course, nowadays for reading on smartphone, for instance. The third goal is to respect, nevertheless, and this is quite contradictory with the second, the complex layout of some kind of books, for instance, technical or scientific books. The fourth is to be able to create enriched e-books and which distinguished e-books from print books. From a long time, when I talk with people which were straight opponents to e-books, they were saying to me, what is the purpose of e-books since it is the same as print books? It is the same layout. I prefer to stick to my traditional print books since there is no value added for e-books. So the idea was to create real value added for e-books by adding some stuff that is impossible to add by definition to print books, which are, for instance, multimedia or interaction, videos, and things like this. And finally, the whole idea is to propose this with an open format that is open to all the professionals. I believe that EPUB is quite a success for achieving all these goals, especially since the new format, the version EPUB 3. And it is thanks to a large community of course, publishers, IT providers, for instance, application providers or other IT specialists, and also to institutions like the former IDPF, and now the Readmagine Foundation community, and more recently the EDR lab in Paris. And many progresses has been done since the last 10 years for fostering this new standard, targeting these 5 goals, and especially with the EPUB 3. Nevertheless, and I believe also that it is a success not only within the e-book community, because EPUB is now used outside even the book community, for instance, by some companies for their documents. Nevertheless, it remains many issues. It is not the end of the story, and I could quote many facts which are many issues for the future, but I'll let you continue perhaps on this matter.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, EPUB right now is the unique format for digital publishing de facto. I mean, for trade books. We create MOBI files starting from EPUBs, so it's only a conversion matter. And for this, for this sector, the trade book, the EPUB is the main format used, but not the EPUB 3. I mean, in Europe, the most used format is EPUB 2 right now, and maybe this is because EPUB 2 for those kind of books is good enough. That is one question that Dave Kramer, that is a very important people in the digital publishing community, asked, is EPUB good enough? Is EPUB 2 or EPUB 3 good enough for those kind of books? Do we really need to move to other formats? I don't know. Okay. Then there is the other sector that is academic books, that is for science and for university and so on that is still based on PDFs, and they still ask for have a paper feeling in the digital world, and it is really difficult to move those files to reflowable formats. So I think maybe in these different fields of publishing, it's not possible to have a unique format for all publishing needs, but maybe we will have different formats for different needs, like right now. Okay. I don't know if...
But do you consider it a field of battle, even commercial battle, the question of the formats nowadays and for the future? Or, I mean, there is, the companies are thinking about the reader, the consumer, or are thinking in other questions in this difference between formats, convergence, or even this changes from the EPUB to HTML, etc. What do you think about this topic of this question?
I don't think there is a commercial battle on formats right now, because it is quite simple to move from one format to another. So it's only a matter of conversions. I mean, from PDF to EPUB, it's a little bit difficult, but from EPUB to MOBI and MOBI to EPUB, it's really simple. From the W3C view, I mean, from the merge of the EDPF that was the consortium that defined the EPUB format and the W3C that is the consortium that defined the web specification. I mean, it was only a matter of time. EPUB is based on the open web platform, so HTML and CSS. So it was already in the W3C specification. And with this merge, we are moving to a new kind of publication that is the web publication, that will be a new entity of the web. So the idea is to have something like a website that is a web publication. I mean, the difference between a website and a web publication is that the web publication has to list all the resources, all the pages, all the chapters that are inside the publication. One big question with this new format is the role of distribution. I mean, if a web publication is available on a website, how do we distribute a web publication? We don't usually distribute websites. Websites are available online. So in this new format, maybe there will be some commercial battles. Okay. But
so it's a challenge for the e-distribution sector, indeed.
Sure.
Yes, perhaps we can distinguish the present state of the art and the future. I believe for the present state of the art, as you say, I totally agree on 2 points. EPUB 3 is far from being largely adopted, especially in Europe, by all the publishers for all their publications. As a distributor, I can observe it. And I share also your opinion that it is probably because many publishers still believe that EPUB 2 is good enough because they only publish textbooks with simple layouts and with no enrichment. The advantages of EPUB 3 over EPUB 2, one of the advantages, it's not the only one, but one of the advantages is, of course, and one of the most perhaps important one is its enrichment potential for adding interactions, videos, new stuff again. And unfortunately, for the moment, at least in the countries I know, and especially in France, I do not see many catalog there are some exceptions. I know some exceptions here in the room, but there are some very few exceptions of rich catalog, with really enriched and sophisticated ebooks. And if you observe the EPUB 3 that are produced by most publishers, they are the same than the EPUB 2. So the question is, for these publishers, why to move to EPUB 3? So if you consider the whole situation, there is for the moment quite a, I would call it a Babel Tower situation, even inside EPUB, because the target of EPUB was to create a standard, but now you have EPUB 2, you have EPUB 3, you have EPUB 3.0, you have EPUB 3.1, EPUB 3.01, EPUB 3.2, which is coming because EPUB 3.1 was not very useful because you cannot use EPUB check. This means that you are not able to check if your file is appropriate, is a good EPUB. So we are moving to EPUB 3.2, and small or any publishers are quite lost between all these formats and also the distributors and also the application provider. So there is no really a living standard for the moment because there are too many versions and we cannot follow and we are not sure of the advantages of one version over the other. Another thing is that you could also is that there are still many PDFs that are produced, and not only for technical or for scientific books, but what I observe is many PDFs for the comics sector, for comics books. Because the author and the publishers of comics books want the layout to be strictly preserved, and the PDF does this quite well. Of course, with EPUB, we have also the possibility to make a fixed layout, EPUB fixed layout. Still, I observe that many PDFs are produced, perhaps because they are more simple to produce than fixed layout, but this is the situation. So the landscape is far from being a quiet standard around EPUB, very far. And now, for a final fact about the present situation, even if we had a standardization of the files format, this standardization is not the ending point of the interoperability questions. Because you have also, at the other end of the chain, to have a good reading applications. Yeah. Too often people forgot about the fact that the final use is for reading. It's not only for producing files. And you need good reading applications for opening EPUB, EPUB 2, EPUB 3, and it is, sorry for perhaps a question which will be open after, but you have also application compatible with DRM. Sorry for the word that will come after and which is often controversial. But since we have sometimes to use DRM, it is not enough to have just application reading EPUB 3, for instance, but EPUB 3 with DRM. And we observe that there are not so many applications in the world which are able to do this. So interoperability has also to be questioned with the effectiveness of these files with reading application and with DRM. So it is still a target, it is still a progress. And I will just finish by asking perhaps a provocative question, considering this landscape, is this the moment for still moving again to another format, to another new format? It's a question.
Sebastian. I was wondering, when you talk about webbooks and EPUB files, whether the role of the digital distributors would change also, like from sending files from A to B to C, C to D, like the whole chain of title, to become more something like role to actually provide a marketplace for licenses. And that's where I think we will talk about the blockchain, where the new technology kind of supports the idea that you basically offer licenses and distribute the information where to get access, and if there's some kind of a purchase or a license transaction, that the actual fulfillment will be done decentralized. So that you if someone buys a license to a book, it doesn't matter where he's being linked or where the content will be downloaded from. So that you actually, that what I would think, and I would be interested in your opinion, that you don't send files and Onyx files, and because that's obviously a big and complicated challenge sometimes to get access to the content and to have the proper information, the right information, the updated information in all places and time. And I think decentralization of the marketplace and actually what in Germany a lot of distributors do is called remote digital warehouse, where you actually not deliver the files to the retailers, but only the metadata, and then the files will be distributed from the publishing house even, or from the service provider. Would you see that, like when it comes to the EPUB file and discussion about web formats, it seems to be the natural way how the business will develop, right?
Yeah. This is the second element of the round table. That we studied during last year. Indeed, Mr. Zwirm was the leader of a working group regarding rights management. That's very active, very well. There is a debate inside the association that we are working in collaboration with the foundation regarding this format group and also this rights management group. So. At the end, there is, the always debate regarding DRM, new ways to protect or to select as blockchain. So indeed, we organized last week the first webinar in collaboration with the foundation regarding the use of blockchain for the publishing industry. It was moderated by Antonio Tombolini from Strilbif, Italy, with participation of IPDI members and some professionals. And I know it's a topic for debate and for different opinions, but what do you think about the future of the rights management, blockchain as alternative or not? So let me think your opinion about that.
You are the specialist.
So, in order, I mean, maybe I can spend a minute on to introduce the project that I've been working on over the last actually 2.5 years, and it's interesting because it's called the Content Blockchain Project. And it's interesting as it originated in a problem of a distributor in the German market, which was dealing with ISBN and digital distribution, because ISBN is not the most suitable for standard identifier for ebook distribution or digital content distribution. So the idea that a colleague of yours came up with is to establish a new standard identifier, which sounds like a crazy idea in the first place, but the idea of that standard identifier was to extract the ID of the content from the content itself by standard procedures, by standard hashing algorithms that are openly published. And on the website content-blockchain.org, you will find everything well documented. It was an open-sourced project funded by the Google News Initiative 2 years ago. So we had the opportunity to experiment and to do research on the whole topic. So the first aspect is to create this, to come up with the idea for the standard identifier and register the ID on the blockchain. to make it public as some kind of a proof of existence. So, this ID just basically says this title is in place somewhere. And the second idea that I've been thinking about for the last 6 years is how could it be that the terms, what you actually can do with the content as an intermediary, as a retailer, could be connected to that ID. So that's the second building block of that of the content blockchain project, to extract the ID from the content and then attach what I call smart licenses to the ID. So which has one advantage. If you have the content, it could be a photo, it could be a text, an ebook, you would immediately come up with the ID. And with the ID, it would be either publicly available or not would be available, the license terms of that. And that was the origination of the project, with the two building blocks. And the third would be all the distribution would be simplified by that if the information, the license information, would be available, and then that transaction could be supported by a decentralized way of selling, actually its tokens, that allows the token owner to get access to the content. So that's the idea that we elaborated for the last 2 years. It's open source, anyone can use it, anyone can have a look at it and get informed or reach out to me. And regarding the DRM debate, it's, I think, a different, in my opinion, it's a different layer of discussion, because actually one thing is that you acquire a content license and you resell it, or you sell it to an end user, and he can publicly claim that this, or prove that he owns the license. That's the big advantage of what you could establish. And if you then connect a technical proof and an API to decrypt the access, or what we created was a paywall application, so which is the same, which could be used. You can see it on the website as well. So it's basically you have content, you want to get access to it, you pay for it peer-to-peer without any transaction fees, and then you will see that the content is available, because you can prove with a token that you have access. So DRM, I would say it's the discussion that you can have if you like or not. So, but it's not connected to the blockchain itself, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. DRM is always a controversial matter, and I've learned that it is. I will make first a distinction in the definition of digital rights management, if you allow me, between 3 components. It may serve to 3 goals: identifying what I call uphill rights, which are the rights of right holders and the licensing models over the content. Mm-hmm. The second component is the identification of what I call downstream rights, which are the use rights of the end users over the content that they have purchased. And the third component are the technical protection measures, in order to warrant that the usage are limited to the rights purchased by the end users. Of course, the frequently disputed and controversial component is the third one, the technical protection measure. And it is where there is an issue and a possible dispute over using it or not. Not on the 2 first one, the identification of appeal or downstream rights. Furthermore, there is still at the moment, we must observe that there is still at the moment no interoperability between the usage of DRM. Many platforms or retailers are using their own proprietary DRM, especially the large one. We can quote them, Amazon, Apple, I quote the companies. But many others are not using proprietary technologies, but they are using closed ecosystem for identifying their customers. For instance, it's just an example, the system with Adobe, which is named Vendor ID, but there are many Vendor IDs-like systems, and it seems that it is a standard DRM, but at the end, it closed interoperability. So there is really a problem of interoperability, not only with proprietary DRM. No, what is the route for the future? Yeah.
Especially also not only in between the different retailers, but also like between, for instance, that if the change of ownership, so like a thing like reselling content, or with so the transfer of license.
We are speaking of management of rights, so this helps to create business model. I'll just take an example. It is simply impossible to create any download digital lending business model without DRM. You cannot give the files to the patrons and say to them, well, return it in 1 week, please. Thank you very much. No, it's not serious. So DRM here helped to create business model and so on. So I believe that it was possible to open a discussion. But in fact, at the end, to be honest, I observed a lack of interest on this subject, except from people which are very opposed to this to this very general idea of any DRM, of any technical protection measure. Only a struggle with people very opposed to this. And other ones, I have never proposition nor comments on just discussing the objective advantages of such DRM. This is the point, and I wonder why. Perhaps it's an open discussion with you.
It's a good question.
Yes, it is a question to the room. But the main interesting thing in this workshop was probably the emergence, and especially I must thank Antonio Tombolini, I don't know if he's here, emerges a new idea, the possibility to use blockchain, perhaps, for like a kind of new route or a substitution to DRM, of a way to handling DRM in a, I would say, in a new cooler way. Yes, more trendy, more cool. So I didn't know anything about blockchain at this moment. So I think, why not? And I will check what it is and if it is possible. That is why I wrote this paper. But I was totally a newbie.
It was very good.
Thank you very much. But I was a newbie, and I'm still a newbie on this subject, completely. Yeah. So I want your opinion, because after having a little studying it, I came out to 3 conclusions, which are, of course, temporary conclusions on these points. At this moment, the question why could blockchain solve the DRM issue? I don't think so. No. I don't think so. I think that, and I've read also what you propose with your project, blockchain could help to deal with the first component of DRM in my previous definition. Yes. That is to the expression of rights of our books and of the granted license. This is another question. I'm not sure that it is an issue for the mainstream publishing industry. This is another debate. I'm sure that it is quite an interesting route, probably for self-publishing, but I'm not sure that it is an issue, but I'm not a publisher, but for the publishing industry, because they already have Onyx, ISTC, ISBN. I'm not sure they need blockchain, but this is an open question. The second, and I will be quick perhaps for the...
5 minutes we have.
Okay. My second point is I'm quite sure that blockchain is not a substitute to any technical protection measure. It's not relevant. Blockchain manages information. It's a decentralized ledger for managing informations, but it does not manage usages. It cannot prevent any usages. So the idea of using blockchain as a cool substitute for technical protection measure is not relevant, I believe, not at all. And the third point is more positive, more constructive. I believe that blockchain could help to foster solution for interoperability. And I will finish on this, on two points for the future perhaps and for future projects. The first point is blockchain could be a solution for recording the right of end users over the books they purchased, whatever the retailer. In the real life, when you purchase a print book in a bookshop, and when you come back home, then you don't put it in your personal library, depending on the bookshop where you purchased it. Yes. Okay. It should be the same. It should be the same with e-books. It is not the same at the moment because we have each retailer has its own application, and you have to remember well. And if one day there is no more this retailer, you lose your books. So there is also the question of the perennity of the e-books, and it is a question that doesn't happen with the print book. I believe that perhaps blockchain could help for this problem.
Yeah, Gregorio wants to add something, and then Sebastian, please.
Yeah, I think that looking at the next 10 years, I'm not sure that DRM will still be a problem. Looking at the work in the W3C right now, the business model is really based on selling files, but we will move, I think, on streaming content, something like that, on vertical solutions, so with paywalls. So, for example, Netflix doesn't use strong DRMs, Spotify neither, and all this kind of vertical solution or Audible doesn't use strong DRMs. So I think maybe knowing who own the rights would be really useful. So with the blockchain, but blocking the copy of the file will be not an issue in 10 years. Don't know, maybe.
I hope so.
10 years from now, we will sit here and think about what's the situation. So, Sebastian.
I think this you're absolutely correct. Yeah. This is also the major application I would see. But what you mentioned is interesting. You could even think of a case where someone goes into a bookshop, buys a physical copy, pays with a cryptocurrency, and he can follow up the read on his iPhone immediately. So that's basically because you identify, you connect the titles, and you see, oh, he actually bought the book in a physical transaction. You attribute that to the user, and then he can read on. Let me mention one thing also regarding interoperability and the resale issue, because that for me. Maybe that's not only my concern. Not only my concern is the resale scenario. I mean, we have in the Netherlands a platform that resells used ebooks. We have that. It's up and running since many years, and there's a case pending at this moment at the European Court of Justice that deals and will decide sooner or later, I don't know, no one knows, about the option, like with software. You can resell software. And my concern was, what will happen if the European Court of Justice decides that ebooks can be resold? And this is actually has been a starting point for me to work on that solution, where actually the license management could solve at least kind of try to limit the worst the implication of this scenario. So the resale is one absolute relevant use case, and but with the tokenization of the sale, a lot of different business models could apply. You could even have limited edition ebooks, like a novel that is limited to 1,000 copies, digital copies. And you all might have heard of crypto kitties. It's like little digital images of cats that you can buy and collect. It's unique digital items, and they sold about, I think it was 28 million crypto kitties over the last month. And these platforms are emerging in the context of blockchain, like digital collectibles. So you can, in fact, buy art for thousands of euros on these platforms, OpenSea or others, where it's growing in value, and there are a lot of interesting models that would come up with, and most of it relate to the management of the license information and how to interact with that. And of course, I would assume that publishers need to get their license information organized. That's, of course, the most crucial thing, and I think that also companies and distributors will serve well their publishers when they actually offer a proper license management tool, because this marketplace of licenses will be coming, if they like it or not. You have to say it like that.
Yeah, we don't have enough time, so you have to finish, but I think it's one of the first conclusions. I mean, we have to continue to discuss and to study this topic, because it's crucial, as Sebastian said, for the future of the publishing industry in general. So we would like very much if the three special speakers and specialists regarding this topic engage with the activity of the association, with the foundation also. For us, it's a privilege and an honor that Mr. Zwirm participate and with the leadership in this group, and I'm sure that was one of the first topic for the future. So, and probably we return to this topic next year, and but during all year we'll have this platform for continue with the work. So thank you again. It was really interesting. I don't know if there's some question for the public. Yeah.
A question for Sebastian. Big fan of blockchain. Has GDPR effectively killed off blockchain as a distribution model? I don't know if you can.
The question was whether GDPR had an influence on the development of applications, and I would think that this is an absolute relevant question that is being discussed quite a lot in the discourse, and especially because it's related to another problem that is not being properly solved regarding the blockchain technology, which is user identification. So there are like open questions how to identify you as a person that is uniquely identifiable, and in a way, you're right that of course the right to be forgotten in a way does not apply. And if your wallet ID where you made that transaction with is publicly known, that transaction will stay on the chain forever. That's an issue. On the other hand, there are a lot of ways to handle to anonymize that, and that you like pay with a different wallet ID each time you acquire something, and that only within your private key it's kind of aggregated. That is not publicly available, but I wouldn't say it kills any kind of development. The people working in the field are very smart, and they will come up with with a even smarter solution. So my answer would be no. It doesn't kill the blockchain idea.
Some more questions? There, James?
Hi, James English, New York Public Library. I wanted to ask a question about, we tend to be looking at these new DRMs and technologies to solve these problems, but it seems to me like, as Sebastian brought up, we haven't even solved the underlying business problem or legal question, and so there's a perspective that maybe we're building a lot of technologies without actually solving the underlying problems and perception that we're solving it. DRM is not going to solve the right of first sale or the standardization of what is copyright between the US legal interpretation and the European Union legal definition of copyright. Access, right of first sale, all of those underlying things seem like legal and business problems around like interoperability. Those are the problem, not necessarily the technology. And I just wanted to get a perspective from the panel. Do you see technology's role as trying to keep forcing a settlement on those, or is it just simply trying to churn and solve problems that kind of exist in the transactional space, but not really at the underlying business model or legal question?
I think I think the technology drives the juridical legal decisions and the politics, and we see that in many cases. And the politicians and the ones who decide are very well aware of what's happening in the technological fields. And it not only applies to first sale, but it applies also to VAT rules within Europe. Or maybe globally taxing it. Only a week ago, in the German market was shattered by some recommendations from a commission regarding price fixing. So price fixing laws that the question derived from the inter-European trading. Open questions regarding inter-European trading, and I would hope that the legal, business needs stability. You need to have the decisions as soon as possible. So even if you will be able to resell a book, have a secondary market for ebooks, it would be better that we know now than in 2 years uncertainty. So what will happen?